The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Whoops, music ended a little early there. I hope everybody's having a great week. Today's Wednesday. Wednesday's like, I never do a show on Wednesday. What's up with that? Didn't do a show yesterday. My wife flew back from Europe, so went to pick her up. And so today we'll do a show. Tomorrow we'll do a show. And then Saturday and Sunday. And then we'll off to California. And California shows what the hours will change and the days will change. So I'll try to let you know what the schedule is going to be once I'm in California and how that's all going to work. So bear with me. Then I'm off to Asia, and I have no idea how I'm going to do shows in Asia. I guess if I do them in the morning, right, like really early in the morning, then it's a normal time over here, something like that. So we will have to see. We'll have to see how all of that works. Today, well, first, thanks for all the comments about my condo. It is a very, very beautiful condo. I don't think you quite even appreciate how beautiful it is in the photos. That's only a bit of it. It's gorgeous. It's truly amazing. It took financially everything I have, and it's worth it. So we're loving it, enjoying it, love living here. So it's amazing. So thank you all for the compliments and for recognizing it. And hopefully we'll have opportunities to see some other parts of it, or at least some more of the artwork, and we can talk more in detail about the artwork in the future. Although, you know, that's the problem. That show has less than half of what I expect today's show, for example, to have in terms of viewership. So go figure. Yes, it was the Yaron's Rules for Life, for last episode of Yaron's Rules for Life on art and beauty. And I gave some examples from my condo. So it was a lot of fun. All right, let's see. So today is Good News Wednesday. This is why I don't do shows every Wednesday, because there's just not enough good news. But once in a while, there's enough good news to fill a show. So we've got 3 news items. Basically, they're all good. I even have something good and positive to say about the creature Nancy Pelosi, who I never say anything good about, and doesn't deserve that anything be said about her. But, you know, once in a while, even somebody as awful as she is does something right by accident, and that happened this week. So we'll talk about al-Zawahiri's death. We'll talk about Pelosi in Taiwan. We'll talk about Kansas, the vote in Kansas. When was it? Yesterday on abortion, which I think was a very significant vote. And then tomorrow, we'll do all the bad news. We'll do the rest of the primaries from yesterday. We'll do, are we in a recession, and why do we care? And we'll cover some other topics. So tomorrow's the bad news. Today's the good news. My guess is more people watch tomorrow's show than today's show, because who wants to hear about good news? Everything is about the bad news. So anyway, that is the program for today and tomorrow, and then we'll see what we cover on the weekend. If you want to ask questions, we have the super chat feature. I see JJ Jingbis has already got us started, and that's always good. Catherine Mendez is here to get you excited about supporting the show. If you wanna become a monthly contributor to the show, you can go to Patreon or Subscribestar and Locals. I think my website is working, but the only option is for $10 monthly support. So if you want to do anything more than that, for now at least, go over to Patreon or Subscribestar, where you can do a larger support. We are still in the process of fixing, improving, maybe completely redoing The website, I've got some bids for some companies, and more expensive than I expected it to be to completely redo the website, more expensive than I expected it to be. So I don't know. I'm undecided about how much money to spend on it, and so on. But we will see. I didn't see anybody give 150 pounds, Rob. I don't know what you're talking about. Did somebody? All right. We did that. We got that out of the way. I think everything's kosher. Remember, quickly, the sponsors of the show. We have ExpressVPN as a sponsor. If you go to expressvpn.com/Iran, you can get the VPN downloaded there, and they will give you an extra 3 months free on top of their introductory offer because you came from this website, and they'll throw me a couple of bucks for every person who signs up. So go to expressvpn.com/Iran and sign up. And I use VPNs all the time. Anytime I want a little bit more security, maybe some anonymity. When I'm traveling overseas, I use VPNs quite a bit. When I'm doing my finances, I use VPN quite a bit. Anytime I want that added layer of security, an ExpressVPN, I've used it in China. I've used it all over Europe. I used it in Russia. I definitely used it in Russia. I've used it in Ukraine. I've used it pretty much everywhere around the world, and it works seamlessly. It's fast. I think now it's also native to the latest Mac, whatever. So they just came out with a new version that clearly is running faster and smoother. So and the same VPN you can use on your desktop, on your laptop, on your phone, on your iPad. I think it's the same subscription. You can use it, on all these. So it's really cool. It's really good. So go for it. Go for it. Get the ExpressVPN, and by doing so, on expressvpn.com/Iran, you also support the Iran Book Show. All right, so let's jump in. Ayman al-Zawahiri was finally killed. God, it took them a long time. Finally killed. It's only taken 21 years for them to get this monster. The more you analyze and you read about the history, the more horrific it is. And even we'll talk about how they killed him. Even how they killed him is such a sign of, I think, such a sign of weakness. But we will talk about that. So let's first talk about who he was. Of course, al-Zawahiri was number two. Bin Laden's number two in Al-Qaeda. When Bin Laden was murdered, he became number one. But his history goes back quite a bit. Zawahiri is an Egyptian. He was born to a very affluent, very well-educated family in Giza in Egypt. His family both generated significant religious leaders within Egyptian society in the past, going back to his grandfather, and also doctors and very very well-educated family. He studied to be a doctor, became a doctor, so practiced medicine here and there. He actually, when he met Bin Laden in the 1980s, he actually served as Bin Laden's doctor for many years. Zawahiri in his youth was radicalized by the Muslim Brotherhood. And now, if you're interested in the Muslim Brotherhood, if you're interested in the history of Islamism, of the whole radical totalitarian Islam, then I highly recommend my course I have a course, I can't remember how many parts, four lectures, 4 or 5 lectures on the history of Islamic totalitarianism, on Islamism, on jihadism. It goes back to the history of the Muslim Brotherhood. It describes the rise of other various Islamist movements, including ultimately Al-Qaeda, and I think we cover ISIS. It's just the beginning of ISIS. But you can find that on YouTube for free. So go check out the videos. I think you'll really enjoy it. I don't think you're going to get a better succinct perspective on the Islamist movement anywhere else. on video, as far as I know. Maybe there's something out there that's better, but I can't remember if it's 3, 4, 5 lectures, but it's pretty short, and you'll get a complete history, including the revolution in Iran and the importance of the revolution in Iran for the rise of organizations like Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood. It's on my channel. It's also on the AOI channel, but it's on my channel. It's audio only, but it is on my YouTube channel. It's also on the podcast channel in the past somewhere, so you can find all of that. You know, the other course that it gives you even a bigger, broader perspective, context for all of this is the one I did on the history of the Middle East, that is also on YouTube and available for free. I think you'll really enjoy that. Again, it's I don't know where you're going to get a better, short, succinct, to the point, essentialized history of the Middle East. So it's probably your best resource for something like that. So use that. It's on my website. It's on YouTube for free out there. I should probably share it on Twitter more often. But please go in and watch it and let me know what you think. Anyway, the Muslim Brotherhood was an organization in Egypt dedicated to a global Islamic revolution. It was founded in the 1920s, and the founders were ultimately, it was in combat with the Egyptian authorities throughout. It had its kind of ebbs and flows throughout the decades, but the Muslim Brotherhood, just to give you, just in more recent times, when there was the Arab Spring in, 2008, 2009, the Arab Spring led ultimately to the Muslim Brotherhood taking to the streets, dominating the conversation, and ultimately winning the Egyptian elections and taking power democratically in Egypt. Failing dramatically, and then ultimately being deposed and being replaced by the current regime, which is basically an authoritarian regime, but a secular one. The Muslim Brotherhood are very popular in Egypt, widespread support. Membership in the Muslim Brotherhood is widespread, even though over the years they have periodically, and I don't know what the status is right now, but they have periodically been banned. They have periodically been outlawed, and yet they continue to exist. They continue to thrive, one would argue. Anyway, at the age 14, al-Zawahiri joined the Muslim Brotherhood. He was particularly inspired by a particular writer for the Muslim Brotherhood, a writer that I talk about in my course on the rise of totalitarian Islam, a writer by the name of Sayyid Qutb, one of the most important figures in the rise of Islamism. Over the last 100 years, Sayyid Qutb was executed by the Nasser regime in Egypt in 1960, I think in 1968, but in the 60s, in the mid to late 60s, as Nasser rounded up the Muslim Brotherhood, an outlawed organization. Sayyid Qutb was a very charismatic, very influential, I don't know what to call him, right? Thinker, Islamist, intellectual. He had visited the United States, had hated America. He is really the one within the Islamist movement to first identify the United States as essentially the enemy. He hated the United States because it was secular. He believed that even Christianity in the United States has basically been secularized, and that secular and this secular and secular America was the enemy of Islam. One of the things that really horrified him when he was in America, and he went to a church dance, and he saw men and women dancing together in church, and he found that idea as truly horrific and a sign of the complete degeneracy of American society. And he writes about this extensively, and he spent a lot of time in jail, and he spent a lot of time writing in jail. And he became one of the most influential characters. Certainly bin Laden and many of the al-Qaeda and many of the radicalized Islamists that came on in the 80s and 90s all read Sayyid Qutb, all were inspired by him, all studied him carefully. So he is one of the theological inspirations for the modern Islamic movement. Anyways, Zawahiri joined the Muslim Brotherhood. The following year, Sayyid Qutb was executed. And following that execution, Zawahiri kind of started an underground cell devoted to the overthrowing of the government and the establishment of Islamic State. As he grew older, he became more involved. Ultimately, if you will, spinning off of the Muslim Brotherhood, it was too dedicated to political change. It was too dedicated to long-term change. He wanted militant, he wanted violence. And he landed up joining his little organization with the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, which by the early 1980s, he was basically the head of. The big event in the early 1980s in Egypt was the assassination of President Sadat. President Sadat was the guy who took over was an authoritarian dictator of Egypt following Nasser. He had launched Egypt into a war with Israel in 1973. But then in 1970, God, I might get my years off by a year or two. But 1979, I think, had come to the conclusion that it was not in Egypt's interest to be at war with Israel, that Egypt had very little to gain from this war, that it wasn't really fighting for anything that it really valued. And he basically unilaterally called out for peace with Israel, which was incredibly unpopular. He, at the same time, also was working throughout the 1970s to slowly secularize Egyptian society. He also, after the 1973 war, which in spite of Egypt's great advantage, it was a surprise attack. It gained a lot of advantage in the first few days. Ultimately, it landed up losing big time, and Israel landed up being not too far from Cairo. Zawahiri realized that part of what made him weak, part of what made Egypt weak, was his alliance with the Soviet Union, with the Russians. And as a consequence, not Zawahiri, Sadat realized this. As a consequence, Sadat kicked out the Russians during the 1970s, moved closer to the United States, declared his interest in having peace with Israel, started secularizing Egyptian society, and actually, in one of the great acts of courage of any politician that I've seen while I've been alive, actually came to Jerusalem and stood in front of Israeli parliament and expressed his interest, his willingness, his commitment to a peace treaty with Israel. Ultimately, that peace treaty was signed with Jimmy Carter and Begin and Sadat, with Jimmy Carter witnessing. As a consequence, somewhat of the peace treaty with Israel, but I would say even more so, as a consequence of his secularization of Egyptian society, a strong move towards greater secularization of Egyptian society, he had a bullseye on his back, and he suspected he was going to be killed, and as a consequence, 1,500 Islamists were rounded up and imprisoned, among them Zawahiri. But he had missed a cell that was actually within his military, in the Egyptian military. And during a military parade, this unit, which was parading in front of him, suddenly broke rank, ran towards where the president was sitting, and shot him dead. Zawahiri, while in jail during this period, they accused him of being part of the assassination. They accused him of being part of the cell. But ultimately, some rumors say that he cooperated and handed in some high-ranking Islamists. So ultimately, the Egyptians accused him of, weapon charges or something like that, left him in jail for 3 years, and released him in 1984. So he was released in 1984. He goes to Pakistan, and ultimately, there he meets bin Laden. This is at the time where there is a call for jihad in Afghanistan. all these Islamists are going to Pakistan and then launching attacks against the Russians from Pakistan into Afghanistan, all in the name of jihad, all in the name of getting the atheistic communists out of Afghanistan. So Zawahiri latches on or becomes very close to bin Laden, and from that point on is affiliated and associated with bin Laden. It is interesting that in spite of this, he managed to visit the United States in the early 1990s. I think in 1993, he addressed several mosques in California. Even though, I guess at this point, Al-Qaeda, or at least what was the previous version of Al-Qaeda when it was fighting the Russians, was considered an ally. But of course, soon after that, Al-Qaeda is involved in terrorist attacks, primarily starting in the late 1990s, 1998, the U.S. embassy bombing in Kenya and Tanzania, where hundreds of people were killed. He was indicted for that in absentia. It was indicted, and then in 2000, the bombing of the U.S. Cole. Again, he was deemed to be one of the planners of that, and to a large extent, it's quite clear that he might have been the mastermind, if not one of the masterminds, behind the 9/11 attacks. He was on a list of the top most wanted terrorists in the world by the United States. Now, since 2001, since 9/11, 2001, supposedly the United States has been after and trying to murder him and kill him. Kill him, not murder him. I mean, this would be an act of self-defense. He has been leading Al-Qaeda since bin Laden's death. As I said, he's been number 2. He's been very much the spokesman. He is very much an organizer. He's really been suspected for a long time to be kind of the intellect behind the charismatic bin Laden. On several occasions, it is said, the United States had a clear shot at killing him. Certainly in the direct aftermath of 9/11, this is true both of him and in bin Laden. They didn't take the shot because they were afraid of collateral damage. On one occasion when they did shoot, when they thought he was there, I think one of his wives and children were actually killed. But the United States has had lots of opportunities to kill bin Laden, lots of opportunities to kill Zawahiri, particularly again in the months after 9/11. They didn't take it because of the fear of collateral damage, of civilian casualties, which is horrific. This is a guy who didn't care about collateral damage or civilian casualties. He targeted civilians, killed as many as necessary. And America, in defending itself by killing somebody who was continuously planning to attack America, refrained from doing it. Even the bomb that killed him, what was it, a few days ago? Even that bomb was a bomb that was that is very low impact, so it creates very little damage. I mean, this is kind of the technology that we have today. They literally noticed him on the balcony and sent a missile that would kill him on the balcony and pretty much not harm anybody else in the building. Now, he was in a building, in a home in Kabul, in Afghanistan, in a very large home, in a very, very, very lucrative neighborhood, the richest neighborhood in Kabul, not far from many of the foreign embassies, or at least were foreign embassies, before the foreigners evacuated as the Taliban took control. It's interesting that it was in Afghanistan, not surprising at all, but interesting. Partially because the peace agreement that the Taliban signed with Donald Trump promised us, committed to us, that the Taliban had promised not to work with terrorist organizations and not to harbor terrorists like Zawahiri, and here we are, the head of al-Qaeda, at the heart of Kabul, in the heart of Afghanistan, and as far as we can tell, Arabs, remember the Afghans are not Arabs, the Arabs who are coming in from the Middle East are going in and out of his compound, in and out of his house, continuing to plot and plan and support terrorist activities probably all over the world. Who knows what he's already put in motion. So this idea that the Taliban is not in league with al-Qaeda, the idea that the Taliban will not support al-Qaeda, will not continue to harbor al-Qaeda, is a joke and is ridiculous. And the idea that the Biden administration, so that's Trump's peace deal. I mean, the idea that you have a peace deal with the Taliban is a travesty, an abomination, and a betrayal of America. But, you know, that's just a day in the office for Trump. But the Biden administration, on the other hand, is saying, look, we left Afghanistan, but we can still hurt them. We can still go in and we can still do this. We can still kill the head of, so he's taking full credit for this, where he deserves none. I'm sure the CIA has been working on this for years and months and has been working to try to make this happen for a long, long time. But notice, they used a bomb just to kill him. Nobody else in the house was killed. They haven't attacked any of what I assume are training bases of ISIS and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. They continue to kill one-off leaders here and there. But as far as I can tell, there's no concerted bombing attempt. There's no concerted attempt to destroy al-Qaeda's capabilities now that the Taliban are back in Afghanistan and back allowing, I'm sure. So the credit and the, Biden is not saying, you see, this vindicates my leaving Afghanistan last year. Now, I'm all for leaving Afghanistan. Not the way but the way he left was so disgusting, so horrific, so treasonous, so reflective of American weakness. Just horrific. And for him now to say, see, it's all worked out, no. Nothing has worked out. This continues to be an example of American capitulation and American weakness, and there's nothing to suggest that America can handle the if Afghanistan becomes a base for terrorism, which it's very, very likely, probably already is, a base for terrorism. There's no evidence that the Biden administration has the will or the ability to take care of that. It is interesting, and I don't know the answer to this, but it is interesting to speculate where the drone took off from. I mean, did the drone come from Pakistan, from a CIA base in Pakistan? The Pakistanis are not going to acknowledge that. They're not going to admit it. Is the drone has flying distance enough to be able to have come out of a aircraft carrier in the Indian Ocean and flown to Afghanistan all that distance, hung around until the exact moment where the guy was going to be in the balcony and then shot him? Did it come from the north, from Uzbekistan or Tajikistan, where the United States has had military bases? Hard to tell. That's interesting. It just interests me as a former military intelligence guy. I'd love to know where the drone came from and kind of how it functioned, and to what extent was the government of Pakistan aware, or to what extent is the government of Pakistan right now freaking out and pissed off because the origins of the drone are probably in Pakistan. But in any case, all of that I'm sure is super confidential. And since the government of Pakistan is not going to let the world know if it came from its base on its land, we probably won't know. But it would be interesting. These are pretty significant missiles, so it can be a little drone. It's a substantial drone. No, who knows? Maybe the CIA has a base somewhere in the mountains in Afghanistan itself. I mean, it really is with drones big enough to do this. I doubt that. I think that's too risky, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had a base in Pakistan, and I'm pretty sure they have bases in Tajikistan or in Uzbekistan, in the north of Afghanistan. But maybe it just came off of an aircraft carrier, although then I don't think it would have been characterized as it has been as a CIA operation. So anyway, a lot of interesting kind of military intelligence stuff that I'd love to know, and I'm sure you guys would love to know as well. At least some of you would love to know as well. All right, so good riddance. I'm glad Zawahiri's dead. I wish he'd been killed 20 years ago. I wish he'd be killed 25 years ago. By the way, Egypt sentenced him to death in 1999 over his responsibility for terrorist attacks that happened in Egypt, even though he wasn't there anymore. But good riddance to him. And it would be nice if there was more of a concerted effort to really dismantle and completely destroy and eviscerate the lasting remnants of al-Qaeda and ISIS and all the rest of them. So this just becomes a non-issue. Unfortunately, as long as the Taliban rules Afghanistan, as long as the Taliban is growing in power, and it has, it's consolidated power in Afghanistan, I think it's going to be. I think we're going to have periods in which we'll see a resurrection of significant terrorist activities against the West. As long as Iran is out there, as long as the Taliban is out there, these are the two major forces, and I don't see any reason to assume that there's also not money flowing in from Saudi Arabia and some of the other principalities on the Gulf to fund a lot of these the schools and the radicalized and the actual hostility, the actual terrorist bases. Yeah, it would be good if the United States took care of business in that part of the world. It's 21 years since 9/11, and we're still not doing anything. Oh, Saudis are easy. What's the problem with the Saudis? Saudis are the easiest ones to deal with. But like everything else in foreign policy is generally easy. But foreign policy is generally easy if you're willing, if you have a spine, if you have principles, if you're willing to take a stand and stick to it. It's not hard. Saudi Arabia is a nothing. It's a blip. It's insignificant. Somebody just has to lay down the law. Somebody just has to confront them and tell them how they need to behave. Otherwise, their military wouldn't survive a weekend against the U.S. So, but you can't do it today. You can't do it today. I have an understanding of realist theory, and I reject realist theory completely. Realist theory is BS foreign policy theory, just as every other conventional theory of foreign policy is BS. I'm sorry, I don't accept any theory of foreign policy that is taught today at universities. They're all nonsense. They're all nonsense. I presented my theory of foreign policy to professors who teach this stuff, and they go, "Whoa, we've never heard of that." I don't know if Ayn Rand would agree with me. I have no idea, but I have a certain view, and it's not realist, and it's not any other thing that's out there. But I'm not a neocon. I'm not a realist. I'm not a internationalist. I'm not any of the conventional ways. I've laid out my foreign policy in the past. And my views of Saudi Arabia have been expressed in essays I've written. My views of what to do with Iran have been expressed in essays. I think my shorthand for Iran is give it the infrastructure, its civilization, its mullahs, its attitude deserves, and that is, I think, somewhere closer to the Stone Age than where they are today. All right, let's see. So that is what I have to say about Zawahiri. He's dead. It's cool. It's excellent. Not enough, though. Disappointing. Not enough. And this round of triumphant from Biden, unjustified, and again more indication of the weakness of the Trump administration in Afghanistan and the Biden administration. Both administrations super weak in Afghanistan. All right. let's move to a different part of the world, and not that far geographically, to China, to Taiwan, the Taiwan Straits. Nancy Pelosi is the third highest ranking American politician. She is second in line to the presidency if something happened to both Biden and Kamala. Nancy Pelosi, God forbid, would become president of the United States. But she is horrible. She is exactly the kind of politician ones hate the most. She doesn't really believe in anything. She has a generally leftist, statist, authoritarian attitude. She does not believe in the Constitution. She does not believe in really the rule of law in the sense of individual rights. She is, like most politicians, dishonest and full of herself. But she, during a trip to Asia, has decided to visit Taiwan. Now, no American senior politician has visited Taiwan since the late 1990s, when, again, chairman of the House of Representatives visited Taiwan back then, because back in the Carter administration, coming out of negotiations that started under Richard Nixon, who visited, who horrifically and I don't know, just horrifically visited China and met with Mao Zedong. I think one of the most horrific acts of an American president. Following the negotiations that followed that, and the recognition of China, of the United States, and the United States of China, and opening up of embassies and opening up of trade, as part of all that, the United States agreed that Taiwan, that it would never recognize Taiwan as an independent state, independent country, separate from China. Indeed, the United States committed to closing its embassy in Taiwan, replacing its embassy in Taiwan with an embassy in Beijing. And while the United States did not withdraw its support of Taiwan, its arming of Taiwan, its all kinds of other ties with Taiwan, its political, quote, diplomatic ties were non-existent, according to this treaty it has with China. And therefore, a senior politician, American politician, going to Taiwan and meeting with the president of Taiwan is, in a sense, a legitimization of the Taiwanese regime. Now, notice how significant the bully pulpit is, how significant moral sanction is. Moral sanction is. To the Chinese. That is, notice that the Chinese are really pissed off, and not a little bit. They're majorly pissed off. This is really, really important to them, even though it doesn't change the balance of power. It doesn't. We haven't sold, better weapons to Taiwan. It hasn't given them a nuke. It's just, the Speaker of the House going and shaking hands and having a conversation with the president of Taiwan. That is causing the Chinese to be apoplectic and threatening war. Now that shows you how powerful moral sanction is, how powerful moral condemnation, moral action really is. In many ways, if one acts, speaks in the right way, if one is principled, then often that can avert war. That is more threatening to a regime like China than an actual war is. So I think it's incredibly powerful to see this. So imagine an American president who have to actually condemn China for the right reasons. Imagine an American president who actually stood up to China. Imagine an American president who shut down the embassy in China and brought everybody home. Imagine an American president who condemned to hell the Chinese for what they did in Hong Kong and offered all residents of Hong Kong visas to the United States. Imagine how that would have been completely demoralized the Chinese regime. You know, I don't know why this always comes back to Trump, but Dank YT wants to make it about Trump. Trump did not do this. Trump attacked the Chinese because they were, quote, economic threat. Trump attacked the Chinese because they traded with us. And trade is bad. Having a trade deficit is bad. Trump never condemned Hong Kong. Trump never condemned what they were doing to their own people. Trump never condemned the lack of free speech. Trump never condemned the fact that it's a dictatorship. Trump never condemned the fact that there were no individual rights in China. Indeed, Trump was super friendly to Xi many times. Trump said, oh, I've got a fantastic relationship with Xi. I get along fantastic with Xi. Xi and me, we're best buddies. No. Counter to what everybody believes, Trump was super weak on China. Super weak on China. Trade, 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 trade. He focused on the thing that doesn't matter and ignored the things that do matter. Now, every American president does the same thing. But there's a mythology about Trump being tough on China, tough on Russia. Like Trump just said in an interview, if he was president, he said again, Russia would have never invaded Ukraine. And there's an element of truth to that. If Trump were president, Ukraine would have given Russia everything it wants. It would have committed not to joining NATO. Trump would have twisted Zelensky's hands to do that. And they would have just handed Ukraine on a silver platter to Russia. And therefore, they wouldn't have needed to have a war because Putin would have got everything he wanted. That's what would have happened if Trump were president. And Trump now says there shouldn't be a war. Ukrainians should give Russia everything they want. So to hell with sovereignty for Ukraine. To hell with Ukrainian interests. That's not a lie. Go read Trump right now. So, would have never, it's true, there would have never been a war because Putin would have just been handed Ukraine on a silver platter with keys attached. All right, so good for Pelosi for going to Taiwan, sticking a little finger in the eye of the Chinese, taking a stand, talking about freedom, talking about democracy, talking about, the vote. And the fact that Taiwan is one of the freest countries in the world, has a great economy, is prospered, is incredibly wealthy, even as compared to China on a per capita GDP, significantly richer than China. Taipei is this amazing city. And good for her for standing up to the Chinese. Chinese will not do anything. There will not be war over Pelosi going to Taiwan. The Chinese, have a long-term plan. They're not going to change the long-term plan because of Pelosi. They're going to make a lot of noise. They'll fly a lot of airplanes. They'll put out a bunch of ships. Maybe they'll take some insignificant island. But war is not going to happen over what Pelosi did. Yeah, you have to hear about Trump again. Sorry, Wanda Freeman. We're going to talk a lot about Trump because, particularly if he runs for president, you're going to be talking tons about Trump. I hope he doesn't. That'll free us up a little bit. But tomorrow we're going to talk about Trump because Trump's candidates all won, pretty much all of them, won yesterday. So that's significant. All right, quickly from Stephen 13. China will take Taiwan. Russia will take Ukraine. Neither one of those things are going to happen anytime soon. Russia certainly is not going to take Ukraine. There is and China doesn't have Russia does not have a chance of taking Ukraine. I often predict these things, and I'm right, and nobody ever comes back and says, "Yeah, Iran, you were right." Like I predicted Trump would lose, and nobody who was certain, who were convinced, who had no concept, even after the election, were convinced Trump was going to stay in the White House when I said he was going to leave. Nobody ever comes back and said, "Yeah, you were right. Sorry." Russia will not win in Ukraine, will not take Ukraine, it will not win in Ukraine. China might take Taiwan. It's not going to happen in the next 5 years. Maybe in 10 years afterwards. Iran is pretty much always right. More right than not, by a long shot. You know, it's pretty amazing going back and listening to my own talks from after 9/11 and how much of what happened afterwards I kind of predicted. I know what I'm doing. I know it's... I also told you on day 2 of the war with Ukraine that Ukraine was going to put up a fight and the Russians were going to have a really, really hard time. Anyway, so Stephen 13, no. I know you're on China. I know you're on China's side and on Russia's side, but you know, yes, call me a Nazi or call my friends Nazis. That's just shows you're just a little Russian bot, right? Yep, Zelensky, the Jew, is a Nazi. Yeah, it shows how people have no concept what Nazis are. But that's okay. Stephen 13 is a Dugin bot, All right. Well, you being real and not being a bot, it makes you a lot worse than if you're a bot. Bots don't have moral culpability for the stupidity they spout. I guess you do. All right. Let's see quickly. Asterisk on Taiwan. What's your opinion on Taiwan in general? I see you've rated higher in the Freedom Index, and I view their struggle against China as heroic. What do you think? Yeah, I'm a big fan of Taiwan. They're highly rated in the Freedom Index, both in terms of social freedom and both intellectual freedom, freedom of speech, and economic freedom. They were a dictatorship under Deng Xiaoping when he founded Taiwan after fleeing the communists. So he had, in a sense, a fascist like Taiwan versus a communist like China. Taiwan didn't become rich under the fascists. It's really when he died and his heirs slowly converted Taiwan into a freer economy and also ultimately converted Taiwan into a country that was free politically. It's only then that Taiwan became rich. Taiwan is one of the great Asian tiger stories. It's one of the great stories of human progress, of wealth creation in the world. It's the only country in the world that I can tell that dealt with COVID well, effectively, from very early on. It has an epidemiologist as vice president, so they dealt with it super well. I'm definitely a fan of Taiwan. And I've never visited. It's one of these countries, one of the few countries in the world. Well, there are quite a few actually. One of the countries in the world that I want to go to and haven't yet had a chance to go to. There are not that many of them, and Taiwan is definitely one of them. I was trying on my next Asian trip to go to Taiwan. I couldn't pull an invitation. Nobody's willing to invite me to come and speak there. Maybe one of these days there'll be a conference there or something like that, and I'll be able to go. It's one of the most successful, freest countries in the world today, and I give it a huge thumbs up. All right. Let's see, anything else? All right, Ashton Milky Way says, you're on for $300, $300. Could you review the music video? Oh, Jesus. History of Philosophy Rap by Waka Waka Ali on YouTube. Really, Ashton? I mean, the problem is that, Waka is, I'm friendly with Waka. I like Waka. I'll review it if you really want me to. And you're putting $300 behind it, so that's a significant amount, so I will do it. But if I have negative stuff to say, I hope that Waka forgives me, and it's on you, Ashton, if he doesn't. All right. Also, Ashton, you asked me a question last time that I thought maybe you were joking about. I realized afterwards you were serious about. I don't know if I was fair in how I answered that question. So if you want to rephrase it, if you want to rephrase that question, I think it related to Trump and stuff. If you want to rephrase that question, I'm happy to try to answer it again. But I felt bad afterwards, like I'd not, given that you support the show significantly here, you're one of my biggest supporters. I want to make sure that I address the question at the right level. I think I might have thought that you were kidding. Anyway, so go for it. If you want to ask a follow-up, or if you want me to, remind me of what the question was, and I'll try to answer it more seriously this time. All right, let me see. Where are we? Let's talk about Kansas and abortion. Pelosi in Taiwan, good news. Good news, I think, for America. Good news for those of us who are particularly concerned about China and the direction it's heading, and any opportunity to kind of morally assert our superiority and Taiwan's superiority. Taiwan's moral superiority over China should be celebrated. Also, I would say that we should, with Taiwan, we should be advocates of a one China policy where Taiwan takes over China. All right. That would be a strong foreign policy position. We believe in one China. We believe Taiwan should take over China. That is, the political system in Taiwan should overtake the political system in China and should dominate it. And then I think everybody will be for reunification. All right. Kansas and abortion. Big victory for abortion rights in Kansas. So Kansas has abortion constitutionally protected in its constitution. At some point, some smart Kansan, whatever, post-Roe added to the Kansas Constitution something that basically made it illegal for the Kansas legislature to ban abortion because it's in the Constitution. The Republicans in Kansas decided that since they have a supermajority in the House and Senate, they can override, I think, a governor's veto. The governor, I think, is Democrat, but they can override a governor's veto. So they decided they would like to pass a ban on abortion, just like many of their neighboring states are doing. But they have the Constitution, and it's a problem. So they put to a vote, basically repeal the constitutional amendment. Get rid of this constitutional amendment that prohibiting abortion. They put it up there. They did it purposefully in an election where turnout was expected to be very low because this is a primary election. It's not even a midterm. It's a primary election. Nobody votes in primaries except the committed. And they figured, given that Kansas went for Donald Trump by 15 points in 2020, it's a solidly Republican state, that if they did it during the period where only the dedicated really go vote, that will be dominantly Republicans. Turnout will be low. Republicans will vote to eliminate the they will eliminate the again, the constitutional amendment. Turnout landed up being, for a primary, historic in terms of the numbers. Close to 1 million people, 900,000 plus people came out to vote. The constitutional amendment, the Constitution, was upheld. Basically, the vote was no, 60-40, to change the Constitution, to repeal this amendment. The pro-abortion side won big time in a dominantly Republican state, 60-40. It turns out that many Republicans voted to protect abortion in Kansas. But, importantly, this vote motivated many, many Democrats who probably wouldn't even shown up for this primary, because what's the point? Democrats are going to lose pretty much every election in Kansas. So why vote for in a primary where your candidate's going to lose anyway? Democrats came out to vote in mass, given that this was on the ballot. It blew up in the face of the Republicans, and abortion is now protected in Kansas, which is a massive blow to Kansas Republicans, a massive blow to the anti-abortion movement around the country. It also shows that it is possible in a red state to actually protect abortion. It is a warning signal to many Republican legislatures that there might be, not clear that there will be, but there might be political backlash if they try to outlaw abortion completely. It might also suggest that this is going to be a big issue for Democrats. It's hard to imagine that this is going to change the midterm elections dramatically, because those are typically national elections, and this is now a state issue. But at the state level, it could. So it is going to be super interesting. As you know, I am pro-abortion, not pro-choice. I'm pro-abortion. And I hope that, on this one, that the left wins big everywhere around the country, and that abortion rights are preserved, even in places like Kansas. We'll see what happens in Missouri. We'll see what happens ultimately in Texas and other places. But good for Kansas. This is great news. And very, very, very positive news. All right. I am pro-abortion. Yes, pro all abortions. Any abortion that a doctor and a woman agree to do, I'm pro. None of my business, none of your business, certainly none of the state's business. But of course, the prohibitions that the Republicans are suggesting on abortion are not about late term. The prohibitions that Republicans are suggesting on abortion on every abortion, every single abortion. So, this is not about late term abortion. This is all about first term abortion, which is where 90% of all abortions happen. By week 21, 98.7% of all abortions happen. And yeah, Phil, I did not see the two questions. They've disappeared, so I have no idea where they are. It's probably not a good idea to post Super Chat questions before the show starts, or well before the show starts, because I don't know where YouTube puts them. So, I believe you that you put the $150. I believe they're in the queue out there that I'll get the money. So what I suggest is that you put up a couple of $5 questions or $2 questions, doesn't matter, and I'll treat them as if they were $150 questions and answer them with priority. But they never showed up. And my software that pulls the questions in did not catch them, so I apologize for that. All right, we got a couple of more Ukrainian, Russia. Ashton says, I love your positive attitude towards the Ukrainians, their support, and I think they will be victorious in the end as well. But nothing is ever certain in war. You were also wrong about saying Russia was not going to invade in the first place. Yes, I was wrong about that. I am wrong sometimes. I did not say I was never wrong. But I was wrong about about Putin not invading. I assumed Putin was more rational than he turns out to be. I also, suspected that this was going to be a really, really tough war for Russia. So, I think Russians regret, even Putin regrets invading Ukraine. This has been a disaster. We'll talk about it tomorrow, about the Russian economy. and how disastrous this has been to the Russian economy. But this has been a disaster to the Russian military. You know that the Russians now are begging for drones and other military technology from Iran. That's how pathetic Russia is. It needs the help of the Iranians. The Iranians? Let me say that again, the Iranians. So this is going to be bad for Russian sales of weapons, because the world has seen how pathetic their weapon systems are. The few American weapon systems that the U.S. has provided the Ukraine, trashing the the Russian weapon systems. They're just devastating them. There's no comparison in terms of the quality of the missile projectiles, of the anti-missiles versus Russian tanks. Again, counter to people like Stephen 13, I've actually fought against Russian tanks. I know something about Russian military equipment. It sucks. It's pathetic. So Russia is. I think Russia is regretting this war because it has shown its weakness. Add to that the fact that it's almost a certainty that Sweden and Finland are going to join NATO. That is a massive strategic loss to Russia. To have Finland and Sweden, which have a much longer border than Ukraine has with Russia, now be members of NATO, is a massive, massive failure for the Russians. So no, Russia's already lost. No matter what happens, Russia has lost, and it truly is. It's truly sad to see. But I was wrong about Russia invading in the first place. I'm still saying that China will not invade in the next 5 years Taiwan. But those are the kind of projections that you could easily be wrong in. But I think as China watches the struggles that Russia is having, China is going to be very, very hesitant to use military force against Taiwan. China's long-term plan, I believe, is ultimately the peaceful takeover of Taiwan, just like they took over Hong Kong. It's going to be a lot more difficult with Taiwan. Oh, Stephen 13 again. Russia will win the war. The Russians on the right side of history. I hope you will understand that. No, I will never understand that. Russia is on the wrong side of history. I showed that on my show on Alexander Dugin. Russia is on the Russia is in the primitive, barbaric, pre-modern side of history. It's on the side of history that would make the United States and the rest of the West go back to the Middle Ages. There is nothing good about about Russia's positioning, and the fact that it is nominally anti-left, as you see the left, does not make Russia good. Russia is right now represents evil in the world. All right, a few more super chat questions. We don't have a lot, right? We only have 3 questions left. So it's up to you guys. If you want to stick around and have me answer more questions, you're gonna have to get engaged. We have raised $450. We've got $200 to go to reach our goal of $650. Again, there are only 3 questions, so we're going to go through this pretty quickly. Gail says Russia missed the Enlightenment. It did, although there was a real effort by Catherine the Great and by Peter the Great to bring the Enlightenment in, but they brought the Enlightenment in by force. They used coercion, and the Enlightenment never stuck in Russia because of the mysticism and the out and out mysticism and out and out collectivism that Russian society has deep in its roots. So while Russia has produced some amazing individuals and culturally some significant people like the great musicians, the great novelists, but Russia is an insignificant. They produced great chess players and some mathematicians, but Russia has been insignificant historically. The Russian Empire was not a significant entity in the world. The Soviet Union ultimately was an insignificant and a failed entity in the world. And Russia today is a super failed entity in the world. It is a poor country that barely economically survives, ruled by a thug, and it exerts its muscles once in a while to prove to itself that it's still alive, but it has no relevance in the world. And if the West was strong, if the United States was strong, that's the only hope Russia actually has, because what is going to happen to Russia is a complete disaster. Stephen 13 says he's not anti-left, he's anti-synthetic left. That is, he's anti-liberalism. All right, he's anti-liberalism. I'm pro-liberalism. I've always been pro-liberalism. Pro-liberalism means pro-liberty, pro-freedom. Liberalism means freedom. I don't like left and right labels. I'm pro-freedom. I'm anti-authoritarianism. I'm anti-mysticism. And therefore I'm I'm anti-Russia as it manifests itself politically and intellectually. I'm pro-liberty, pro-freedom, left and right labels without much significance anymore. All right, super chat questions. We got a couple of additional ones, but we're still about $200 short. So I'm just going to put this. I'm not libertarian, and I'm not on the right. I'm neither libertarian nor right. How can I be on the right? I think I'm being accused of being on the right. How can I be on the right if I'm pro-gay marriage, pro-abortion? I can't be on the right if I'm pro those things. So I'm just pro-liberty. All right, give me liberty or give me Russia. I like that one to Freeman. That's good. All right, Jisbis, whatever, right? Do you enjoy Charlie Chaplin films? I love Charlie Chaplin films. Do you consider him great art or something along those lines? I personally love him and consider him one of the great filmmakers, which he clearly was I suppose, to considering his influence. Yes, I mean, I am a big, I love Charlie Chaplin. I think Charlie Chaplin was an artist in the art of film, in the art of comedy. I think his movies are incredibly touching and funny. I think he was a real innovator in the art of filmmaking, and made people laugh. He was an incredible comic. He was an incredible filmmaker for comedy. His silent films are amazing. The one talkie that he did, well, he did two talkies, I think, are also very, very good. He directed the movies. He starred in the movies. He wrote the movies. And he wrote the music to the movies. And the music is beautiful, beautiful music to the Charlie Chaplin movies. So I'm a big fan of Charlie Chaplin. I really like his movies, and I definitely consider them art. Even though, by the way, politically he was a socialist. I'm sure politically, philosophically, I would disagree with him on a lot of things. But great artists, it's not a question of politics. Art is not about politics. That's a pretty leftist, postmodernist perspective, that art is predominantly political. I'm not a postmodernist. So yes, I encourage you to watch Charlie Chaplin movies. They're really fun, beautiful, touching, emotional. Jacob says, studies confirming transient for now, changes in menstrual cycles. Fauci referred to it as the menstrual thing, need more study. You pushed for vax. Amish telling pregnant to get boosted. Menstrual only growing tip of iceberg. I guess we will see, Jacob. I doubt that it's a growing tip of iceberg. All the evidence I'm seeing is that vax are super safe, that vax are super effective at preventing hospitalization and preventing death and reducing infection, not preventing infection, but reducing infection. I'm still pro-vax. I still think pregnant women, and every scientist I've talked to agrees with me, pregnant women should have gotten vaxxed. Amish was not pro-booster for young people. I'm not pro-booster for young people. I'm not I certainly for children, I'm not even pro-vax for children, and I've never was, and neither was, well, Amish I think said different things in different times, but in terms of children, but I think ultimately he's not a big supporter of children getting vaxxed. But yeah, I mean, there are a million studies out there, and I think it's going to take a few years to to siphon through all the bullshit. But I think by the end, when we siphon through all the bullshit, you will find the vaccines are unbelievably safe and have very, very few long-term side effects, if any. And that since all vaccines have some side effects and all vaccines cause some issues, we will find that the mRNA vaccines are a massive scientific breakthrough that's going to have implications for other areas of medicine, and your concerns about menstrual cycles and stuff like that is very, very, very minor and insignificant compared to the massive benefits that vaccines are providing, and the significant step forward that their development has provided mRNA vaccines, which I hope now are going to be used for a lot of other diseases, including cancer and other things that are going to really have a significant impact on the world. Jonathan, should Bush have nuked Afghanistan after 9/11 instead of sending over 2,000 troops to die and send CIA after al-Qaeda? No, I don't think it was necessary to nuke Afghanistan. I mean, nuking is, I think, certainly a last resort. It does make the place unusable for a long, long time. But there were lots of things you can do short of nuking. You could have bombed the Taliban strongholds, including places like Kabul and Kandahar. You could have bombed them into oblivion. You could have destroyed every remnant of al-Qaeda. They should have never made it to Tora Bora, those caves in the mountains, because they should have been destroyed on their way with airplanes that were functioning freely over the skies of Afghanistan, because there's no air defense systems over there. So it was like they were just shooting, what do they call it? Shooting something into something. But ducks in a barrel. They could have destroyed every al-Qaeda cell, and they didn't. Even when they were in Tora Bora, if you remember, al-Zawahiri and probably bin Laden were there with much of the al-Qaeda troops and leadership. Instead of sending warlords to get them, they could have sent the Marines. They could have cut them off in the Pakistani border. Once al-Qaeda crossed over to Pakistan and the Taliban crossed over to Pakistan, Pakistan could have been threatened. Instead, it became an ally, but it could have been treated like the enemy that it really is, and told that if they don't hand over the Taliban. So there were lots and lots of things that could have been done. Given the power of the U.S. military, given its capabilities, given what it could do. Remember that the first thing that the American Air Force did in Afghanistan was drop food. Drop food. And then they bombed. And then they dropped more food. And then they bombed. And then they dropped more food. And even when they only bombed certain places. They only bombed what were clearly and unequivocally military facilities. If you want to understand how I think the war in Afghanistan should have been handled, how the war more broadly after 9/11 should have been handled, read Winning the Unwinnable War that was edited by Ilan Journo. It lays it all out there. Or go back and find my talks, which are all available on, all these talks are available on YouTube, that I gave after 9/11 that talked about the war and talk about Afghanistan and talk about what could have been done and what should have been done, and how America should have and could have won that war. I'd just be rehashing all of that. But we should have never sent 2,000 troops. We should have never sent troops. There's no reason to put troops on the ground. But if you put troops on the ground, they should have stayed there more than a few weeks. You should have destroyed the capabilities of the Taliban and al-Qaeda to ever wage war against America and gotten out of there. That's it. So there's never any reason to put down troops there, keep them there for years and years and years and years and years and years. Pathetic. Ashton asks, do you think Alexandra Dugin's philosophy ultimately is just a call for government to return back to monarchy? He hates fascism, liberalism, and communism, and his fourth way just seems like he wants to return to divine right. I don't know that he wants to return to a king. A czar is a king, and I don't know if czars technically had divine right of kings. He wants an authoritarianism assigned to a leader that both embraces the spiritual and the material superiority of the Russian people, that embraces Christian Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox religion, and a mystical view of the destiny of Russia. This is why he likes Putin so much, but I'm sure he'd want somebody even better than Putin, who is even stronger than Putin. So I think Dugin is an authoritarian, a statist, who, I don't know that there's a sense in which the divine right, or it doesn't have to be the divine right of kings, it could be the divine right of the anointed, and who knows who is anointed. But essentially, it's Dugin's whole philosophy is that an absolutist ruler should rule Russia in the name of the Russian people, in the name of the Russian God, in the name of mysticism. Dugin is the essence of evil in terms of his ideas and in terms of who he is. He is an evil person. He is the ultimate Ayn Rand villain. Sadly, the people even in this chat who like him, he is poisoning the American and European right with his primacy of consciousness, mysticism, and statism. And this is the battle. There is a battle being fought right now, the opposite of the battle, not the opposite, but a different battle than what Jordan Peterson sees. The fundamental battle is between Ukraine and Russia, where Ukraine represents the West. And in that sense, Ukraine has to win. And there is the real enemy, I've told you for years now, the real enemy is the religious fascist right. And that is what Russia represents. And sadly, there is another enemy, which is the left. Those of us who believe that neither side of those is right are in the tiniest of minorities. But I think the Dugin side of the world is going to win. That's what the dim hypothesis, Leonard Peikoff's dim hypothesis, predicts. And all the signs I'm seeing suggest that it's right. I mean, the rise of conservative nationalism, which is exactly what Leonard Peikoff lays out as the winning combination, and the fact that it's happened so quickly and so early, is really, really, really scary. Dugin is really, really, really scary. The Dugin phenomena. Lori says, your show Sunday really raised my spirits. I've had a great week. Excellent. I am so happy to hear that. Fabulous. I'm hoping today's show does not diminish that. Dean says, New Zealand is a beautiful country. I think the most beautiful country in the world. It stays this way with a lot of government regulations aimed to keep New Zealanders' natural habitat untouched. What would happen to it without environmental regulations? Nothing. I mean, I don't know. What would happen? The sheep would still be there. The mountain peaks would still be there. The lakes would still be there. I don't know. Maybe some people would build homes in places you don't like, but which would have great views. But I don't know what would be different about it. It would be, I don't know. I have no idea. I think it would still be the most beautiful place, and it would be a more exciting and more fun place. More fun place, absolutely. So I don't think capitalism destroys environment. I don't think capitalism makes things unbeautiful. I think people have a real desire to see beauty around them, are willing to pay for it. And if you privatized all those peaks and a lot of them, and all those areas in New Zealand, a lot of it would become national parks. A lot of them, national private parks. A lot of it would be developed, but for tourism and for living, and it would be beautiful, and people would enjoy it, because you're not going to undo New Zealand's natural beauty. That is just there. All right, Ashton is back. Let's see. Yaron, would you leave the U.S. if the federal government banned Ayn Rand's books? Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if I'd leave the country. Maybe, probably. Depends where there was to go. Depends on what circumstances Ayn Rand's books were banned. But I would definitely go underground, if you will. I would definitely go stealth. I would try to find ways to fight. Because what the government banning Ayn Rand's books would represent is the end of free speech. And the end of free speech really represents the idea that the only way to bring about cultural change is through force. It is something you have to fight for. And I would devote a lot of time and energy and resources and effort to fighting against the US government because it was now banning speech, banning my ability to make a living, banning my ability to fight for my ideas. So the only alternative when you stop me from speaking, for me to fight for my ideas, is with an AK-47. Or to just, retire, assuming I'm too old to fight with an AK-47. Once free speech is gone, all they've left you is the gun. And yeah, you don't want to get to that point. You don't want to get to that point. All right, where are we? We are $80 short. $420 questions, and we're there. I'll take a Kalashnikov AK-47 over an AR-15 any day. Any frigging day. It's the only Russian thing that I actually like. I like the. I've actually been to Russia. Most of you have not, I assume, but I've actually been to Russia. So there are other things I like about Russia, but certainly the AK-47 in terms of military equipment is the one I really love. If you want to go, if you're going to go into battle, that is the semi-automatic weapon to have going into battle. It's indestructible. It's really amazing. But, there's no accident. That gun was made a long, long time ago. Yeah, but the M16 is just a longer version of the M15, or the M15 is a shorter version of the M16. And the M16, again, is no comparison to the AK-47. When I went to Beirut in 1982, and I jumped in my Jeep and drove up to Beirut during the war, in the back of my Jeep, I threw an AK-47, not an M16. If I'm going to go into a danger zone, I'm going to have an AK-47 with me, not an M16. The problem with an M16, and as a consequence with the AR-15, is that a little bit of sand in there, a little bit of mud in there, too much water in there, and they die. AK-47 is also can be fully automatic. Nobody goes into battle fully automatic. No soldier actually uses fully automatic mode, so it doesn't really matter. But the fact is that M16 will jam on you time and time again, and AK-47 won't. But special forces in Israel for years and years, now they use an Israeli gun, but for years and years and years, all used AK-47s, not M16s. Everybody wanted to avoid an M16 if they could. All right. Ashton is back. All right, so now we're only $60 short of our goal. We're getting there. We're getting there. Another $20 questions and we'll be there. Yuan, could you do a show on gun rights in the United States? Oh, God. I hate that topic. I don't like the topic because I lose subscribers. One of those topics where I lose subscribers. It's one of those topics where my position is not kind of one of these lines in the sand that you guys so like, because I have this position that's nuanced, and people don't like nuanced positions. Although you don't like my land in the sand about abortion either. So I lose no matter what I do. I'd rather just not do a show on gun rights. I mean, it comes up all the time. I talk about it all the time. But and maybe at some point I will do it. But maybe I'll interview somebody about gun rights, somebody who I think has really thought about it and really has a clear view of it and really has an understanding of it. I don't find it particularly interesting. To me, economic rights, what happens in the economy, regulations, even abortion and these other issues are so much more interesting than guns. I just don't find guns interesting. I also find a lot of the issues around guns and war, so many people talk out of ignorance of what a war takes and what a war requires and what you do in a war, how a war feels, what kind of weapons you use in a war, how a war is engaged. And the same with the Civil War, how you would, the whole idea of Americans should have guns for civil war. Very little thinking goes into what does a civil war look like in the United States? What kind of guns would you need in order to fight such a war? What kind of equipment? It's just, and it's hard for me to go through all of that. And maybe I'll be in a mood one day. But thanks, Ashton, for the support. Really appreciate it. All right, Colt says, I'm sad after watching the primaries last night. Most of the better Republicans lost. Please send me your finest box of tissues. Tomorrow, I'll be talking about the primaries yesterday and why it was such a disaster for the good guys. But yes, I'm with you. It's sad, pathetic, particularly Arizona. Arizona's like a lost state because what's really going to happen in Arizona is two options. One option is that Arizona becomes Democratic because of yesterday's election, which is a good possibility. And the other possibility is that it becomes Republican, and then people like Donald Trump use these crazy people that just got elected, at least as nominees of the Republican Party, to steal elections in the future. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Oh, I saw something. One of Freeman said something here interesting. Iran and David Deutsch debating the semiconductor bill would be cool. You mean David Deutsch is supporting the semiconductor bill? That sounds so out of character of David. But then I don't know David that well. That just doesn't sound like him. But that's a good debate. I would debate David Deutsch on that. Because that one is a no-brainer. I mean, we don't have to get into epistemology and our differences in epistemology for me to whip the floor with David on that one. I mean, really, that's really easy. So, and I'm curious about his reasoning for wanting to support the bill, but that would be interesting. Yeah, we would agree on it. So why did you say it was a debate? Yeah, I don't. All right. Wonder Freeman, you have thoroughly confused me without even putting any money on it, right? If you do super chat, it's legitimate to confuse me, but like just in the chat to confuse me, that's not right. Anyway, let's see. $50 short. Come on, guys. Don't let Catherine go to sleep because of depressed because of $50. All right, Frank says, is there any beauty in abstract art? Look at Pollock painting and a photo of the surface of Jupiter or of a nebula. I don't see much difference. I mean, it depends what you mean by abstract art. Music is abstract art, so obviously there's beauty there. Can a modern piece of so-called art, see, I don't consider Pollock art. I don't think Pollock is an artist, and I don't think what he does is art. Could it be pretty? Could there be beauty in it? Yes. Colors could be very nice. The pattern could be very, you buy a carpet with a geometric design and with colors, or maybe even just splash paint kind of looking. It can look really pretty. And sometimes you see on a wall, like at restaurants and places, they put up on like a painting, but it's just it's called design. Design is different than art. By the way, I don't think architecture is art. Architecture is semi-art, but it's not art. It's design. And you can have a Pollock painting that is pretty. It's just not art. Because it is not an effort to recreate anything in reality. And it is not conveying any metaphysical value judgments. It's not telling us anything about the artist. It's not telling us anything about his philosophy, his metaphysical value judgments, his deep-held beliefs, maybe about his emotional state when he sprinkled the paint on the canvas. But these paintings are, they don't convey anything. There's no there. And that is true of all non-representational art. Now, Picasso is still representational, distorted, purposefully distorted representational, but representational. So is, many of the early 20th century artists. But once you get a Pollock, once you get a spraying paint on a canvas, once you get the lines, once you get in canvases with just stuff on it, that's not art. It's just not art. Now, I did a talk on this. You can find it on my YouTube channel on modern art, and I think you'll find it very illuminating. I think it's design. It can be pretty. It can be interesting. It's just not art. So I encourage you to find I think it was a pretty good talk that I did earlier in the year in Edinburgh, and where I talk about a lot of this. All right. Anthony says, have you been to South Dakota? What do you think of the landscape? Amazing, in my opinion. Yes, I've been to South Dakota several times. 3, 4, 5, I don't know, several times. I've been to some pretty boring places in South Dakota with no nice landscape. Basically, the eastern part of South Dakota is just part of the prairie. It's just flat and boring. It gets interesting once you get to the Black Hills and you go west. And it's very pretty. It's very picturesque. It's got a beautiful landscape. It's not the most interesting place in the world other than that. But yeah, I've spoken in South Dakota, in both Sioux Falls and in the other place that I forget its name. Okay, the only two states I've not been to are Alaska and North Dakota. Never been to North Dakota. All right, guys, $51. $49. Stephen came in with $2. Daniel Rubles, you should definitely visit Taiwan. Yes, I certainly would like to. Yuan, it is much more of a free market than the U.S. I lived there for a year. I believe that. I think that's absolutely right. And I want to visit. All right. I wonder if the Chinese will be offended if I go to Taiwan. Anthony says, any views on the Chinese space station, Tiangong, or NASA saying that China will claim ownership of the moon when they land there? Yeah, I mean, if America's weak, then China could claim ownership of anything they want. And China is clearly confident and willing to assert itself. America is not. So that makes sense. What are my views on the Chinese space station? I don't really have many views on the Chinese space station. It's there. It's China has the technology. Again, I really believe that China is on the decline. I don't think that China is on the rise. I think that China is going to get into real economic problems. It's already facing real economic problems. Those problems are only going to grow. They're not going to get better. And as a consequence, I think China is a power on the decline, not on the rise. And I think anything about space and about the moon and about this station is going to be a struggle for the Chinese, given their economic and financial challenges that they're going to face, and technological challenges that they're going to face in the near and midterm future. All right, $25 short, $25, we can do it. Colt says, sometimes I wonder if I don't think enough for myself, because over the past 8 months, I've sounded more like you, but at least I'm interesting in front of my friends, even though I've always been an oddball. Also, shut up, Stephen. Yeah, I'm with you on the shut up, Stephen. I mean, he's just obnoxious. He's wrong on everything he says, and he's just obnoxious. Why is he here? He clearly disagrees with me about everything. I mean, literally everything. If you understand philosophy, he disagrees with me about everything, even when superficially we might be in agreement, we really disagree. So why is he here? It's kind of funny and interesting. Why not? Why not? But Colt, just because you agree with me doesn't mean you're not thinking for yourself. But you should try to figure out, right? Try to really think about it, and do you really agree with me, or it just sounds interesting right now, and you don't really? Or I know we disagree, I think, about religion, but yeah, I mean, the fact that we disagree about religion might suggest that maybe you still have some thinking to do. Because if you really thought it through, you'd completely agree with me on everything, right, Colt? Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're thinking more and more like me. I'm glad to hear that you're interesting in front of your friends. And I'm super glad to hear that you've always been an oddball. I like oddballs. Oddballs are cool, very cool. All right, Jared. Jared has brought us home to the 650. We're at 655. Maybe, yeah, 655. Thank you, Jared. Really, really appreciate the support. All right, so we've got 2 super chat questions. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn, for getting us over the threshold. Appreciate it. All right, Dean asks, what about private companies destroying rainforests, like in a lot of Africa, South America, countries? A lot of the beauty was destroyed, like in Madagascar. Where there's no private property, beauty will be destroyed. But look, there's no right to beauty. If I buy a piece of property and you think it's beautiful the way it is and I want to change it and make it something else, it's mine. So I have no problem with beauty being destroyed, but I actually believe that won't happen. By the way, rainforests are not beautiful. They're just forests. There's nothing beautiful about a rainforest. But the rainforests in Brazil are being destroyed because there's no private property. And indeed, the problem in Brazil is because the farmers in Brazil don't own the land on which they are. And in a sense, they're kind of nomads. So what happens is they keep moving. They keep moving to the next plot of land, burning down the forest, planting stuff there, using it for agriculture, then getting kicked off because it's not their land, it's government land. So they go to the next piece of forest in the Amazon, burn that down. But if they were actually granted property rights over a piece of land, then they would just farm it and they wouldn't keep moving around burning forests. So property rights are the solution to almost all of these things. So, but again, you don't have a right to beauty. If the Grand Canyon ultimately sells to an entrepreneur who wants to build a house and doesn't want anybody to come and see the Grand Canyon, unlikely that is the person wanting to spend the most money on the Grand Canyon. I believe that somebody who's interested in preserving the Grand Canyon as a tourist attraction or making money off of it as a tourist attraction is more likely to buy the Grand Canyon. But if somebody does buy the Grand Canyon and just plops his house on it and that's it, you don't have a right to the Grand Canyon. You don't have a right to beautiful stuff that is not yours. You should absolutely privatize every national park. You should privatize every inch that is not absolutely necessary for the military. You should privatize every inch of the United States. Every inch, including the national parks. National parks were established by the progressives, by the left, by the progressive left. It was established by, well, the progressive right, if you will, by Teddy Roosevelt, by Wilson, by FDR. Those are the proponents, big proponents of having national parks. But I'm all for privatizing them. All right, Stephen gets the last word. Are you going to let Stephen have the last word? Stephen 13 says, the neoliberals are a threat to the working class. All right, Stephen, this is, again, this is economics. Something I actually know something about. Well, I know something about everything I say, but the neoliberals are the greatest thing ever for the working class. Globalization has done more for the working class than any other single government policy in the last 70 years. 70 years. Neoliberals and the globalization has done more for the American and European working class than any other policy of government over the last 70 years. And that is an economic fact. And if you want to ignore that economic fact, you're free to do so and suffer the consequences of your ignorance. But that is a reality. The push towards globalization has been a massive benefit to the poor, to the middle class, to the lower middle class, and so on. Didn't Phil have those questions that he said he'd, but he disappeared on me. I don't know what happened to them, so maybe you could submit them in a different way. Okay, I have a few more questions that are not super chat questions. If you guys want to stick around, I'm going to take these. There's an app, query.com, something like that. I forget the exact name of the app, but there is an app. I'm just trying to find these questions. So one second, give me a second, and I'm going to get these. Whoops, we got more questions coming in on the super chat, but let me first. God, why is my all right, let's see. I'm looking for these questions that have been asked of me. There it is. There's a query app where people have asked me questions. They pay to ask me questions. So here's the answers, and then we're gonna post this on the app. Okay, a question from these all from a few days ago. How do you think about aesthetically mixing modern technology and applicants in your home with art? Appliances, modern technology with art, without doing modern art, because modern art may fit better but doesn't give the same pleasure. So I don't get it. All the art that I have in my house is art. Art doesn't have to be modern or it's art. Modern furniture doesn't go with so-called modern art. Modern art is not even art. I believe that my modern appliances and modern technology and modern furniture go beautifully and perfectly with the great epoch of great art, where there was a Renaissance or where there was most of the paintings I have are 19th century. I have some decorative art. I have vases and stuff like that, but on the wall, I have real art because I want the inspiration of real art. But this idea that modern appliances, modern technology goes with scribbles on a piece of paper, go with what you call non-objective art is absurd and ridiculous. I just don't accept it and don't buy it. The values projected in great art, 19th century, 18th century, 16th century, the values projected in great art are the values that make modern appliances and modern technology and modern furniture possible. So they're completely congruent. They're completely consistent. I wouldn't put a Kandinsky or a Pollock on my wall if you paid me for it. Paid me $1 gazillion, I wouldn't put it up. Because they're destructive to my soul. So, and they're destructive to the souls who created, if considered as art, they're destructive to my soul. And destructive to the souls of the people who created the modern technology and the modern appliances. So aesthetically, they go beautifully. Modern appliances, modern furniture, and art from 100 years ago. But of course, I wish there was 21st century art that was great. There just is very little. There were a few pieces on my walls, my wife's sculpture, a number of the paintings are of artists living today. Does that make them modern? Just makes them good. I think they're good anyway. All right, 7, this is another question. Peikoff mentions in his talk, "A Picture is Not an Argument," about the perceptual level mentality of the masses, which make them quickly give up on reason, which is conceptual. What do you think makes so-called intellectuals like Dugin, Kant, etc. reject reason? When they clearly live in a world of words and are capable of dealing with concepts. I mean, I don't know, but think about how Ayn Rand describes Ellsworth Toohey in The Fountainhead. These are people who, for whatever reason, might have some kind of inferiority complex, a low self-esteem, a a feeling that they don't belong, that they don't fit with the universe, with the world out there, kind of a metaphysical angst that leads them to a certain hatred of reality, of the world, and of other human beings, which therefore leads them into a whole dark place. I mean, a lot of very, very religious people, a lot of very, very smart people. Why are they very, very religious? Some of it because they can't think out of it. They're afraid. Some because that's all they've known their whole lives. That's the best, most benevolent explanation. But many of them, I think, know that this is bullshit deep, deep, deep down. They won't admit it even to themselves. They evade that thought in order to maintain power, in order to maintain relationships, in order to maintain their cowardly way of life. So, they are conceptual while denying the tool of forming concepts. And really what they want in the end is to control human beings. And that's clearly what somebody like Dugan wants. He wants to control other human beings. And think about a primacy of consciousness. One of the frustrating things about the primacy of reality, the primacy of existence is, you can't control that. Your wish doesn't become a reality. It's very frustrating to a lot of young people. Just because I wished it didn't happen. Shit. And part of their response to that is to come up with a philosophy that says, I just didn't wish hard enough. And that's what the primacy of consciousness really is. I just didn't wish hard enough. I didn't wish right. I didn't use the right wishing tools. I didn't say the right prayer. But yes, through those mechanisms, that can affect reality. So a lot of these people are frustrated by the world, by reality. All right, here's another question. Given the recent discussion, would you say that among the, let me just see something. I can't tell. 45 minutes, okay. All right, given the recent discussion, would you say that among the founding fathers, the actions of Alexander Hamilton probably caused the most damage over the years, with him lobbying for and creating the country's first central bank? Certainly, I think that his efforts to control the financial industry and efforts to establish a kind of a central bank were dangerous. Although, I don't think that he's properly understood there, and it's not clear that what he wanted was the kind of central bank that we have today. But yeah, buying up government debt and so on, all of that was very damaging. But look, you could also argue that Thomas Jefferson's was more damaging in the sense that Thomas Jefferson was the founder of the University of Virginia and fully endorsed state support of the universities and of education. And what has been more damaging, state education or central bank? Hard to tell. Next question. Great debate with Michael Green. That was on the Federal Reserve. Most of the discussions seem to be focused on the practical side of things. Could you comment on the moral implications of a Fed central bank actions? Yes, I mean, the central bank undermines the unit we use to trade, and therefore undermines, it immorally gets in the middle of every transaction done in dollars in the world. It gets in the middle of it, immorally intervenes in everything that we do. And it does it by setting interest rates. It does it by manipulating the money supply, by creating dollars out of thin air. So the central bank as a moral agent is constantly intervening and undermining and putting itself in the middle of transactions that are none of its business. So it's morally, like any, and then of course, like any central banker, it is trying, and it's succeeding, to impose its will on all of us. It's telling us how we should live, what we should do in a crucial part of our life, money. The part of our life that, again, involves every transaction out there. Again, morally corrupt. Morally corrupt. Okay, one more question. Okay, that's it, I think. All right, great. So, Action Jackson, if you're here, I don't know if you're here. Angela, you just cut those out and put them in the query app as answers to the questions that they asked. Let's see where. Oh, we got some new super chat questions. Okay, Roosevelt, thanks for a great show you're on. I appreciate the great work that you have done and will continue to do. Thank you. We really, really appreciate it. Thanks for the support. Ashton, are you still upset that people are taking down Thomas Jefferson statues? Yeah. I'm always going to be upset. That is going to be an upset that is going to be with us forever. Why not? Why not my question? What are we talking about? Right? Yeah, so I'm always going to be upset by the fact that people are putting down Thomas Jefferson, one of the great men of all of history. It deserves many a statue. Colt Savage says, the statement is very interesting coming from a guy with cowboy logo. I think somebody's inconsistent over here. Yeah. It's somebody pretending to be an American. In spirit, at least. Yeah. He's talking about our friend number 13. Mark asked, almost reaching the goal you're on, what are some good things and groups people can belong to if we're trying to get out of religion ourselves? Well, I think the best way in terms of getting out of religion is, to read Ayn Rand, to think about the ideas that Ayn Rand presents, and really focus on her morality, on her ethics, because that's the key. So I would say that I don't know of any, there are a lot of books that you can read, but really it's not about being in a part of a group. It's really about doing the thinking necessary for you to undo the damage or undo the conviction that is religion. And that just requires you thinking about it. And I would say objectivist groups, find objectivists who are not obnoxious and who would be happy to kind of bounce take your questions and engage with you with the questions about religion and just work it through until you're happy with it. I hope that answers your question, Mark. Let's see. Ashton, I'm not sure what you're asking. You're saying what? I have a feeling Ashton is like behind. He's not listening live. Is that possible? I don't know. Anyway, thank you, everybody. We are indeed at the end of the show. So I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate you joining me tonight. I appreciate the support. I appreciate us reaching the goal. Thank you, Catherine, for helping them get there. You should definitely like the show. We've had a lot more than 100 people on the show today. Probably 400 or 500 have come in and out. So it would be great if before you left, you hit the like button. It just helps with the algorithms. It helps promote the show. It helps get us more visibility on YouTube. If you don't follow me on Twitter, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I'm going to make an effort to be more active on Twitter. And I'll see you all tomorrow, where we'll be a lot more negative. We'll talk about the bad things that happened over the last few days. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of